I have a real special treat for us today. How many remember Brother Joe Riley? Know Brother Joe Riley? This is his son, Brother Dawson Riley. And if you've listened to many of Brother Branham's tapes, you'll find Brother Branham talking about Brother Dawson and him going on hunts and different things like that. Well, when I first met Brother Branham in the 60s, and he'd tell me some of the hunting stories, and I was so envious. I thought, Lord, I'm going to meet them people. They're going to be my friends one of these days. And so this is one of my very special friends, Dawson Riley, Earl Williams, all those people that I never dreamed God would allow to cross our path. And here, Brother Dawson's come this morning. I've asked him to give his testimony. He's not a minister, but it took a little pressure, not a whole lot, you know. I don't know if Dawson's ever done this. Have you ever done this before? Not many times. He's my type of man. He loves hunting and he loves the wilderness. And so I'm going to turn the service over to him, and I want him to take the whole service. I want it videoed. Your children are going to hear things. I'm going to hear things that I've not heard before either, of some of the times and how he hunted with Brother Branham and how the Lord had revealed things that would take place and different things like that, to let you know that, and this same God today is amongst us. See, Jesus, the Word, is amongst us. The Word and Spirit. The Word couldn't be here in our hour without the Spirit being with it, because they're one. The Word and Spirit are one. So it's a real pleasure to have him come by. My mind and heart has been on him for the last month, and I'm trying to get numbers to call him, and he's been feeling the same way. So I believe, once again, our steps are directed of the Lord. And so at this time, I want to turn the service to Brother Dawson Riley and let him come and share his testimony. And I know you're going to leave here blessed. By the way, Brother Dawson's only a couple years younger than me. He may look younger than what he is. He's 62. I'm 64. And a miraculous miracle God did in his body, healed him of cancer on his ear, just because he believed the Word of God. And so, Brother Dawson, if you'd come at this time, I'd like to turn the service to you, my precious friend. Just stand right there.
Okay. I greet you in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. I'm not a minister, and I'm nervous because I don't do this. But I was driving along yesterday morning in Idaho, where I live. I had no thought of even being here. I didn't even think I could make it. I had to drive all night, and the Lord spoke to me and asked me to come today. And I didn't know that he would speak to Brother Jim. He said he spoke to my heart that someone needed a little lift. And I just came to visit Brother Jim, and he asked me to do this. And these things are very dear to me. The most precious thing in my life that's ever happened to me. So you'll forgive me if I'm emotional.
Amen.
And I'm a lion hunting guide. I still guide for a living, and I'm about to start my lion hunts. And I don't know why he sent me. He did. I know that he did. I got in here about 3 or 4 this morning, and they're very precious friends of mine, very dear to me. And the first day I met Brother Jim, we became bosom friends, and all through the years we've remained that way. So I greet you, and it's a pleasure for me to be, and a privilege for me to be here. And I've jotted down a few things, and probably more things kept coming to my mind in the back room, and I jotted them down of things that went on. But before I do that, I'd like to testify of a wonderful thing that happened in my life. I've always been living in the outdoors and I've had a very healthy life. Everything's been wonderful for health for me. And I went to Canada summer before last to work. And I'd finished my lion hunts in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and I took a construction job. Hunting doesn't do much in the summer, as you know. And so I took a construction job way up in the Arctic Circle. And I started having some troubles. And we were working 7 days a week, 11 hours a day. And I'm no kid anymore. And the old equipment, heavy equipment, was jarring me around. And I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what. So I came home to Idaho, and I told my wife, I said, I've got to go to the doctor, which I didn't even have a family physician because I've never been to the hospital. I've never been sick. I didn't even have a doctor. So I went into a little clinic there. I live in a remote portion of Idaho. It's kind of like a paradise, you know. It's really a nice place. And I went to this little clinic, and this doctor said, well, you have got to go see a specialist tomorrow. You're in real trouble. I can't tell you very much because I'm just a little clinic doctor, but tomorrow I'll get you in to a specialist. Well, I went over to Idaho Falls, and the man told me, and he says, is your wife here? I said, yeah, she's in the waiting room. He says, go bring her in. You're going to die. You get your things in order. You have let this go too long. You're in serious trouble. You've got cancer, and I can't help you. So, brought my wife in. Yes. You always think it happens to somebody else. Yeah. I went from perfect health to, he says, I'm going to die. So I said, well, I'm ready. Yeah. But I didn't have things very good for my wife and daughter. I realized I didn't have things very, very good. So he told me what to expect, that he couldn't help me at all, but he could fry me and cook me and you know, do all the chemo and all this. I said, I'm going to go home and think about it. So I went home and pretty much in shock for 4 days. I had about 25 lion hunts booked, and I was about to go. I had taken deposits on these hunts and probably spent most of it. But I thought, what am I going to do? He told me my strength would fail. He told me that my endurance would wane, and that when I told him what I did for a living, he says, there's no way in the world you can do this. It's impossible. I was on snowshoes 90 days of winter in 4 foot of snow, chasing my hounds, treeing these lions, and he said it's an impossibility. He says there's no way your body will stand up to that. So I went home, and 4 days I just walked. I paced. And I told my wife, I said, I'm going to go to camp. If I die, you'll know I died doing what I love to do. I don't feel like I'm going to die. And so he prescribed these treatments, and they were horrible. If I told you what he told me he wanted to do, I mean, it was shocking to me, you know. So I went home and got ready. I started getting ready to go to Jackson Hole to start up on the Hoback to start my hunts. So I went in, and he said these shots were going to be $600 a piece, and that I ought to go have chemo, and I ought to have all of these other things. Well, I've never considered myself a man of faith, but I've always trusted the Lord, And I've lived in the wilderness for several years to get away from people. I'll admit it, you know, I just lived, I liked it out there. I didn't have any neighbors. We didn't have any fellowship, and quite frankly, I'll admit I missed some fellowship, but I had peace. I had peace in my home. I had peace in my heart. And I spent more time in the message than I'd ever spent. And of course, I probably had less money than I ever had, but I had a whole lot better. Everything was better. So I told her that I was going to trust the Lord and that I wasn't going to have any treatments. I went in to see him, and I had my ear frostbit, and it was very angry, and I think I got it frostbit about 4 times. It's 30, 40 below up at Jackson where I hunt, and I ride a mule until the snow gets too deep, and then I get it on a snow machine. So I got it frostbit, and every time I did, a little more flesh would slough off the cartilage, and pretty soon he said, it won't heal, you haven't got anything to heal. So he says, we're going to have to cut that off, probably about half of it. And I said, well, just whack it off. I said, I'd do it with my knife, I could reach it, but I said, I don't know how to, I can't see good enough, so just go ahead and cut it off. And he said, all right. So he had his nurse take some pictures of it. And it was very big, and I told him, just give me the Spock look, you know. And I said, that'd be all right. You know, I never. So anyway, he says, let me. He scheduled me in for surgery about 6 weeks, five, maybe 5. Well, I told my wife, I said, you know, I was in camp. She was at home, and she said, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'll have to catch my lion early. I have 5-day hunts. I book a hunter for 5 days, and if I can catch him early in the hunt, then I get a day or 2 off. I says, I'm gonna try to catch a lion in 1 or 2 days and send my hunter home, so I'll have 3 days, and I'll go get my ear whacked off, and then I'll have maybe 1 day of rest before I go back to work. So she says, well, how is it? And I said, you know what? I think it's healed. It's getting better every day, and I'm not bleeding on my pillow like I was. I think I'm getting healed. And so I said, you know, if it's healing here, it's healing in here. You know, I had prostate real bad, you know. And I said, I think I'm getting healed already. And so when I went in for the surgery, he said, something's wrong. I said, no, something's right. He said, look at the nurse, bring me those pictures. Well, they showed this big angry deal, and here it's a little thing like a dime. He said, cancer doesn't heal. And he said, something's different. He said, it's better than when you came in here. I said, yes, sir, it is. And I told him that I'd been praying. So he went ahead, and he didn't, as you can see, my ear didn't get whacked off, and there's no cancer there. And I haven't had any sickness. I had no weakness. I had the best lion season I had ever had in my life since 1963. I filled 28 hunters, one every 5 days. And he gave me bountiful blessings. I had the finest winter I ever had. Every time the other hunters would complain about not finding lion, I would catch 2 or 3. I had 8 days I filled on the first day. I had 5 multiple lion days. I had 1 3-lion day. And all of those things, they don't happen to very many people. And I'm supposed to be getting older and slower, and the kids are supposed to be getting better, and he blessed me. And I want to throw another little testimony in here. I had heard a lot of stories about how bad moose are, but I had never had any problems. I've been around them over in Jackson for several years now, and I never had any close encounters that were dangerous. Well, one day I had a hunter, and we had our snow machines parked, and my dogs were trailing a lion underneath, and a big lion come out of the Yellowstone Park and killed a moose. And I just showed him the kill. Well, with that bull was a cow, and she was all mad. and she had her mane all down, had her head down, and she just started lowing and coming up there. And this guy said, "What are we going to do?" I says, "We're probably going to get in trouble." He says, "Well, I'm leaving." And he jumped on his snow machine and took off through just a bunch of brush because there was no trail. We're up there, we're listening to my dogs. And so when he left, I was standing between them. It left me exposed. And I'm in 4 feet of snow. I took one step and I went up to here. I couldn't move. And all these thoughts came through my mind. I said, well, this is how you got it. You always wondered, this is it. I mean, I had nothing. I had no protection. I had and she came. And she was about 18 inches away, still coming full. And that guy realized he had left me in a bind, and he turned around, and he came back, and he ran his machine against her side and ran over my leg. And it took the cow about 4 feet past me, and then I grabbed a little limb, and she went on. I know, and all I did is I just uttered the Lord, "Help me, Lord, I'm in trouble."
Yes.
And so I knew he saved me. I knew it.
Yes.
Because she was 1,500 pounds right here, and I'm to here, and her head's this far from me. I knew. So about 2 days later, I was going down the trail, and I thought, this would be a terrible place to meet a moose. And I went around the corner, and there was a moose and a calf. And I was in a narrow, winding trail. And there was no place for me to go and no place for her to go. And I sat there and I prayed for an hour. So she tried to walk away, but the calf was getting tired, and she was getting madder and madder. And I sat there for 1 hour, which the 1 hour prayer doesn't hurt you, you know. So I prayed. I couldn't physically lift this machine up and turn it around on this narrow trail. There was no place to go. I couldn't climb a tree. I just sat there praying. She went about 50 yards, and finally she decided that she wasn't going to go anymore because her calf couldn't go. So she sat there lowing at me and throwing her mane down, and I thought, well, I got in trouble again, you know, and I just prayed. And so she left about 50 yards, and I moved up about 50 yards. Finally, the calf, for some reason, got off the trail, and she turned her head down and was looking off. And I prayed the Lord would give me safety here, and I crowded her at the bank. And I think I hit her with my forearm, and she could have kicked my head off, but she didn't. I got on by, so I knew again. And these are just a few of the things. One time I got stuck in a real bad avalanche, and I couldn't get me or my machine out, and the avalanche had covered us up. And I knew it wouldn't go, and I knew I couldn't dig it out without sliding. So if I created the void to get my machine out, I was going to let this above me slide down and smother me. And I sit there thinking about everything I could do. And I thought, well, you didn't ask for help. And I asked the Lord to help me. And the machine buried, started, and pulled out of that. It's impossible. If you've ever been on one, they won't do that. They won't do it. And it started and it went ahead, and it's not even a powerful machine. But anyway, the Lord took me out of it. And I wanted to witness of those things before I began. And that's last winter. That's just last winter. I would like to pray a minute. Our kind, gracious Heavenly Father, I thank you, Lord, for all your blessings. We're so unworthy, Lord. I ask, Lord, as I attempt to give witness of those things that I've seen and heard about Brother Branham, that you'll bring the things to my memory that are pleasing to you. May they be accurate, Lord. It's been a long time. Help me, Lord Jesus, that I may say the right thing. And if you sent me here, as I believe you did, may your purpose be accomplished. And Lord, bring those things to my memory accurately that I have need to say this morning. And bless to those that may hear it tomorrow and be with us, and may your presence be with us. Forgive us for our shortcomings. Be with us throughout this day. Bless your bride around the world, and we'll give you the praise in Jesus Christ's name. I apologize.
It's okay.
I have some notes here I want to refer to, and I'm not a speaker, and I will blunder around here, but if you'll bear with me, maybe I can bring up some of these things here and give witness. I first met Brother Branham when I was 7 years old. I didn't meet him, I was in my first meeting when I was 7 years old, and we're in Baldwin Park, California. The year was 1947. We came and sat toward the rear of the building. My grandmother was in Arkansas. She was a Pentecostal lady and a real Christian, and she had lived her life raising 14 children. My mother was one of 7 girls and 7 boys. And she had heard of, she couldn't go because she had so many children. She couldn't go to the meetings in Arkansas at the time, in Russellville. So she heard a lot of her friends. And so she sent word to my dad and mother in California. Dad got drafted into the Navy, and he had to go work in California. He said, if you ever get a chance to hear this man, some wonderful things happened. So Dad, he had only been a Christian about 2 years, a year and a half. Mother had been a Christian the whole time. And my dad had backslidden and was in the world. And he had just come in and received the baptism of the Holy Ghost in the Pentecostal church. And so they took us to this meeting. And a little girl sat in front of us, and she was maybe a year or 2 younger than I, and she had horribly crossed eyes, just horribly crossed, and a pretty little girl, and I just had empathy for her in my heart. I thought, oh, the poor little girl. Never did I know she had a prayer card. I didn't know that. I thought, oh, this poor little girl, and she's looking around back over the seat, and they were just very crossed, and so when she went across the platform and came back and she turned around and they were perfectly straight. And that was the first striking thing that I remember in Brother Branham's meetings. And as he would get in the area, we would go, my dad and mother would take us to those meetings for the next few years. And so we became acquainted with Brother Branham's healing ministry. We didn't know he was the messenger of the hour. We did not know there was a message. We just liked to go to the meetings and see the healings. We didn't have any knowledge of who he was and what he was sent for.
That's right.
Well, I was hunting, and I got to meet Brother Billy. We laughed and talked, and I met him outside a lot, and when we should have been in, really. But anyway, I got to knowing him. He was young, and anyway, he said, you know, my dad would really like to meet you and go on a hunt with you. I said, oh, no, he wouldn't. He wouldn't like to meet me. No, that can't happen. I'm not a Christian, you know. And I said, that's not what he'd enjoy at all. Well, one day I'd been up on the San Carlos Indian Reservation, and I caught a really, really big bear. And I had this huge bear, one of the biggest ones I'd seen. Billy liked it, and Brother Billy, and he says, oh, I got to tell Dad. So we went to Jim's Steakhouse down on Van Buren. That was the first time I got to, well, it was the second time. I was just, in 1959, Brother Sherritt, the man on the tapes, you'll remember the name associated with the grafting of the trees, the orange and the lemon. Well, John Sherritt, my dad was working with him at the time, and he came down to Phoenix and had just got a world record rainbow. And we saw it in the back of his car and in the back of his station wagon. And we got to go to dinner with him that day. Of course, we just sat there and be quiet. We didn't say anything, but we got to go. He and Sister Mita and my mom and dad and I and Brother Sherritt and his wife went out to eat at the Los Olivos Lodge there in Phoenix. That was a very wonderful time, a couple of hours there, maybe 4 or 5. And Brother Sherritt, he had a whole wing there set aside, and that was a delightful time. But as far as interfacing with Brother Branham myself, I did not. I did other than just meet him. And so this time at Jim's Steakhouse is when I met him, and we set up a hunt to go to Strawberry. And quite a few things happened on that hunt. Really, quite a lot of things. But one of the things that happened up there is Brother Billy and I were shooting at 22s, and I became aware of how really superior that Brother Branham could shoot. I always thought, before I met him, I used to think I might shoot a little. I know Jim Eddy, he thinks he can shoot too, but he can't. No, and I'm here to testify that I can't. But anyway, he put these he put these empty 22 casings on stumps, and he would just shoot them into oblivion, freehand, offhand, and you just do feats like that. He could strike a match. He could do all these things. Well, anyway, Brother Billy and I were shooting at I don't know if they have them anymore. I can't remember if they do. The old 22 cartridge, they had a red X on them, Super X, so the Winchester. And we were shooting at the X. Well, I think I missed one way, plus or minus a little, and Billy missed the other way. And I don't mean to be disrespectful. I mean Brother Billy. And so Brother Branham says, well, I'll just show you boys how to shoot. And we're just messing around. The hunt was over, and we're just shooting and playing around. And so he said, well, I can do 2 things here. Do you want me to shoot where the X intersects, or do you want me to split your 2 shots? I said, well, it's easy to hit the X, just split our 2 shots. So he took a little time and he shot, and we went down there, and you could have just measured him perfectly. He was exactly between our 2 shots, which put it off center of the X. But he did that type of thing, and it just unbelievable how he could really shoot. I mean, it was gifted, you know. It was beyond regular accuracy. He was just really so. I don't know if I have any notes on that hunt or not. I don't think I do. One of the first times that first time the 4 of us went, Brother Branham and my father and Brother Billy and I. And after that, all the times except 2. All the other hunts that I was with him, except 2 of them, we were alone, because he did it for one reason, and that was to rest and get away. And of course, I was young and I wasn't a Christian, and the thought came to me many times, I wonder why he puts up with going with me. And I really know why. You know, he would talk, he would be tired from not only the meetings got him tired and worn out, but he had a lot of personal interviews, and they would just wear him out and get his body and his mind tired and weak and worn out, and he wanted to rest. And so he could come up there, and I didn't ask him any spiritual questions because I wasn't spiritual. So he didn't break over into that realm. And he could really tell me hunting stories, and I've been known to tell 1 or 2. And so, you know, I just told hunting stories. I used to hang around with a bunch of government hunters, lion hunters in Utah. So I knew a lot of famous people. Most of them are dead. And but they, at that time, they weren't. And I told him a bunch of stories, and he'd like to tell me about his hunts, which I just loved. I sincerely loved them. Yeah. I mean, I loved his African stories, his Canadian stories, and his squirrel hunts. He could tell me about a squirrel hunt. I had just as much fun as I did an African hunt, you know. But anyway, I realized that he was using it to rest. And another thing I noticed, when he'd be tired, he wouldn't hardly eat when we first. Maybe only half a cup of coffee and part of pick at the food. And after 3 or 4 days, after laughing and sitting up till late at night, he would eat full course meals. But at first, he couldn't even half a piece of toast. He didn't eat much. He was very tired, very worn. And many times, a lot of people will never know how physical and how double tough he was. He would sit up telling me stories till 2 or 3. We'd get up at 4 or 5, and we would walk 30 miles. And I was in my prime. You got to remember, I was young, and I could trot all day. I could trot, literally hit a long trot all day long, up and down. Here he's 49, 50 when I met him, and up to about 56 there. I mean, you know, he could walk a young man into the ground. He was extremely, extremely physical. And yet, he'd be tired and worn out, and he would do these types of things. And it amazed me, his stamina, and how one time, which brings me to mind of a story, maybe I have it in here. I don't know if I do. We were up at Strawberry. No, we were in the control road, Pine. We were at Pine. And we had a bunch of lions in a bunch. There was 3 or 4, and they went everywhere. Dogs went everywhere. Went up to the Boy Scout camp. Went up to Milk Ranch Points. They went up on the Pine Creek Trail, and I took off running. And I ran in and that's Manzanita up in there. And if you've ever been in there, Manzanita, you can't see any tracks. There's no. It's heavy. It's thick. You have to crawl through it. You know, Manzanita doesn't bend. You have to do the bending because it is where it is. And you crawl through that stuff, and it barks you, and it tears your clothing, and it's rough. And then the leaves fall down, and it has a mat of leaves, and you can't track. You can't even tell anything. So I'd gone about, I think it's about 7 miles by the way of the road to a Boy Scout camp, and a lion and the dogs would run through the Boy Scout camp, and they had all the kids in the mess hall. Well, I thought, and my dogs were treed up on this big rim, and I thought, well, I better go back and get Brother Branham because he don't have any clue where I am, because I've been gone several hours running, and there's no way in the world that he knows because he can't trail me. Even though he's a good tracker, I knew he was a good tracker, but he couldn't track me. And here I have come through side hills and ridges and brush for 6 or 7 road miles, which is probably 9 or 10 or 11 miles the way I went. And so I started going backwards, and I looked way up there, and I saw Brother Branham. He was about 2 miles away, and I thought, man, he's about where I was. And I just sat down, and I watched him, and he walked everywhere I went. And he came up to me, I couldn't believe it. I could not believe my eyes. Here he came through untrackable ways, and he went exactly, and I knew where I was. I knew where I went, because I tried to pick the best, and I knew where I'd go the same one again, you know. I couldn't believe it. He came exactly up to me, and he smiled, and he said, "You didn't think I'd get here, did you?" I said, "No, sir, I didn't." Well, let me tell you something. I'm going to jump back 2 hours. I had 2 dogs that I knew nothing about. A man called me up and asked me to try them out. And I didn't know anything about them. I didn't know if they were good lion dogs. I didn't know if they chased deer. I didn't know what. Well, when my dogs were running on this lion track, and these 2 dogs took a fox, and I knew they did. I saw the fox. And they caught the fox and killed it, and I thought, boy, that's fast. You know, they may not be any good, but they sure are fast. And they killed this fox, and it was about a quarter of a mile off of this trail that I picked to go follow my dogs. Then I heard them again. There was a pair of foxes. They jumped the other fox and killed it, and it was about another 1/8 of a mile away. And this just down in the weeds, down in the brush. I said, well, they're good fox dogs, you know. And I was kind of amazed that they could catch a fox and kill it. And I didn't say, no, of course. I talked to him, and he said, "You didn't think I'd be here?" I said, "No, sir, I sure didn't." He says, "Boy, wasn't that something about those fox?" It's humanly impossible for him to know where that fox was. I was right there, so I could see it. And if I hadn't stepped down where it was, I wouldn't have seen it. He said, "That was something about those foxes, wasn't it?" And you can imagine what it did to me. You can just imagine. I just tumbled in my mind all day long. Just tumbled over and over. I just couldn't grasp it. I just knew something different here that I ever even imagined. If anybody ever thinks, and you hear these people talk about Brother Branham when he was under the anointing, they don't know very much about that, you know. He the Lord was with him all the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yes.
And he knew a lot of things all the time. One time, the first morning that Brother Branham and I was going from Payson, the first day by ourselves. Nobody else was with us the first time. We got stopped and checked by a game warden. Now, I go months without it, maybe years. But Brother Branham had out-of-state license because he was from Indiana. He hadn't moved to Arizona at the time. And so he had out-of-state license, so he was legal. I had my guide's license. We were all legal. And so he checked us. We got out and put our stuff on the hood of the truck and visited with him a little. And the guy's name was John Hernbrode. And he was really aggressive, you might say, and pretty much of a smart aleck for a game warden, you know. And so we went out, and I was starting to get irritated, and Brother Branham told me to calm down. And I wasn't very calm then, and I wasn't old, you know, and fat. But anyway, he said, telling me to slow down and calm down and be nice. And I was he was harassing us, really what he was doing. So we went on, and that afternoon, he did it. He stopped us again. I said, "You checked us this morning. You know he's from Indiana. You know we got everything. We don't have to show." Brother Branham said, "Just show it to him." I said, "We don't have to do this." He said, "It's just be calm." He says, "How long does it take to show him your license?" I said, "Well, I'm not going to show him it." I said, "He read it this morning. He's not that stupid. You know, he's sitting there listening." And so he said, "Show him your license." So we did, and I was aggravated at the guy, you can imagine. Yeah. So we went on. Well, the next day, he started following us. So I said, well, I'll tell you what we'll do. That guy can't even think about walking with us. Let's just lead him along through the... I said, we're going to go to Washington Park, and the rim's about 2,000 feet there, and let's climb it 2 or 3 times. And drop off and climb it, and let him follow us. We're not going to do anything. We're just going to lead this guy, and we'll get this guy. He said, well, we might catch a lion. I said, all right. So we took our dogs, and this guy's following us. When we came back, we were about 10 miles ahead of him. And he had to be tired, man. He had to be tired. So I said, I'm going to cut his tires. He said, you can't do that. I said, yeah, I'm going to cut his tires, you know, because he's following us, trying to get us trapped. And I said, I'm cutting these tires. I said, he won't get back for a week because he's probably got 1 spare, but he don't have 4. He said, no, you can't do that, you know. And so I was wanting to cut his tires and some other stuff too. And he said, no. He said, you can't do that. I said, all right. So I went over there and I looked at right by the truck and I saw this lion track. And I hadn't seen it that morning. It was real big. It was really big. And so I was looking at this lion track. I said, look at this. I said, we didn't hit him anywhere today. Look at this lion. This is a nice tom. He looked at me real funny, you know, and he says, how old is it? I said, well, I don't know. It's old, several days. I said, I'm not sure. I said, let me get this one dog. I had this dog named Boots. I said, Boots can smell the oldest track of all my dogs. I'll just let him smell it. So I put him on it, and he could barely get some sin out of it and wag his tail. And I said, it might be 10 days old. He looked at me real serious, and this was another shock to me. He says, it's exactly 10 days old. Yeah? Anyway, I was just guessing, you know. I said, I don't know. It might be 10 days old. He said, it's exactly 10 days. So another thing, too, he told me, he said, who's your best dog? I said, Boots. He said, he's not your best dog. He said, what about Eli? I said, he's my second best dog. He says, well, you just start watching them. He said, Boots steals everything Eli does. And I started watching it, and he was copycatting the other dog. And I had here I was supposed to be the one that knows about the dogs, right? I got to look, and I didn't even know my own dogs, you know. He had to tell me. Anyway, one day we were in the... Here was I got a good lesson in shooting one day, and it was snowing. We couldn't go hunting, so we're shooting out the window of the lodge. We're target practicing. I'm trotting over here and putting our targets on this tree, and so he said go 50 paces and put this .22 Magnum casing into the bark with the casing backwards to me. So I went over there and pressed this .22 casing. It's 50 yards. He stands in the door of the lodge, offhand, and he drills this casing into the bark. I mean, it just disappeared. I trot back over there, and I says, yeah, I can't find it. He said, put another one up there. So I trotted over there, put another one. He did the same thing. He said, here, you try it. I said, oh, that's out of my deal. That's out of my league. So I stuff one in there, and I get his gun. And it was a little bull barrel .22 Magnum custom single shot he had made. And it would really shoot, you know, for him. So I held up there, and I'm trying my very best to get my best shot. And I got alongside this casing, and I bent it. But it was still there, and the hole was beside it. And I was impressed. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I was impressed that I even touched it, you know. And he walked over there and he says, don't feel bad. I says, I don't feel bad. I feel pretty good. Yeah, he was consoling me on my bad shooting, you know. Anyway, yeah, I remember he said, don't feel bad. Yeah. One time, you know, I kind of hate to say it. Well, a lot of this I do, but I'm going to because I feel like it. But I do have something in common with Brother Jim Ed. My mama was praying for us boys, my brother and I. We weren't doing too good. We weren't doing very good. And so one time Brother Branham came to the house, and he would usually, when he got out of meetings or if he was out of the interviews and he was tired, he wanted to rest, I told him I'd cancel all my hunters and he could come and I'd just take him. And of course I never charged him any money. I mean, I was just a kid and trying to make a living, but I didn't have any money. But I sure didn't want his money. I can tell you that. I don't care how broke I was. I didn't want $1 of that. And so I would never take anything. And I was so waiting on the next time to see him that I couldn't hardly wait.
Yeah.
And I didn't know why necessarily. I just knew I couldn't hardly wait to see him again. So if he called, I said, "No, I don't have any hunters." And I'd say, "You got to go home." He said, "What do you mean go home? I paid you." I said, "You go home, I'll get you later." And I'd just be rude to these guys. I didn't know how to take care of clients, you know. And I say, you got to leave." He said, "What do you mean leave? I'm hunting. I got a 5-day hunt." I said, "No, something's come up. You got to go." Brother Branham would say, "Somebody in camp?" I said, "Nope, nobody's here. Come on, hurry." So anyway, he came down to the house, and my mother was talking to him, and she was talking and nervous about us and crying, you know. And I didn't know if she said it. She told me later and said, telling him about it, what should she do? And he said, "Just don't nag them."
Yeah.
He said, he said, "They'll be there. You don't have to worry." He said, "They'll be there, but don't nag them."
Yeah.
And no matter what you do and where you go and what happens, I mean, I know we still all have to come to the same message. We all have to come to that word. And none of us are exempt from it. You've got to have the Holy Ghost in your life, or you're not going to make it. I tried it a long time with the head knowledge, and you can't do it. You have to have Christ in your heart, and you've got to have a personal experience with Jesus Christ, or you won't get there. But it's still a wonderful consolation to know he said it. It doesn't excuse my bad doing or mistakes I've made. It doesn't lessen any of that. We have to pay for everything we do, and we'll pay many times over. The price is great, but still, what a consolation deep down when you know it's priceless.
Amen.
Anyway, he said some more things, and one blessing that our family, all of my father and my mother and my brother and my sister and I, every one of us has had visions from Brother Branham pertaining to our lives. That's such a blessing in itself. Every single member of my family have been touched through the prophetic word of our messenger. And that's a wonderful privilege also, and I wanted to mention that and how thankful I am for that. My brother, one time, my brother was going to go and the doctor was going to cut on him for...
Go.
Am I taking too much time?
No. Go. Is he taking too much time? No. All right. There's your answer.
My brother was in the hospital and they were going to cut on him for a hernia. And Brother Branham called me up. And he said, "Look, don't let them cut on your brother. He doesn't even have a hernia. That's nerves." And he was already in the hospital. So I called down there. I said, "Joe, don't let him operate. You don't have a hernia." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Brother Branham said, your nerves are doing that." I said, "Don't let them cut on you. You don't even have one." So he went home. My brother went home. And He was supposed to have this operation the next morning. And he told, see, we would have never known.
No.
We'd have never known. And they wouldn't have told us he didn't have one.
No, they wouldn't.
You know, they wouldn't have told us.
He covered it up.
And it wouldn't have done one thing, you know. But anyway, he told him that. And I'm not going to get into my sisters. That he did give a vision about her. And I won't get into that, or my mother and my dad. But another time, this is kind of interesting to me. There was a trio. And there was a mother and two daughters, and they were all old maids living way out by Wickenburg, Morristown. They lived out by Castle Hot Springs. That's where it is. They lived way out, and they were really primitive women. They were nice, and they sang bluegrass. And one of them played a dobro, and one a mandolin, and one a guitar, and they could really sing good. I mean, they could sing good if you liked that kind of music, and I did. Well, Brother Branham said, hey, you know where they live? I said, yeah, they don't have a telephone. They don't even have any electric. I said, I can tell you right now, they don't have a telephone. They don't even have power, you know. He said, can you get them? I said, yeah, it's not very far. I'll go get them. He said, well, I want them to sing at the Christian businessmen's deal at the Ramada, because those businessmen women don't like them, and they won't have them call on them. So what you do, you have them over here in the wing, and I'll call on them. I said, all right. So I go out their house, and I said, you guys, Brother Branham wants you to sing. And I'll tell you what song it is. He mentions it on tape several times, and I'll think of it in a minute. I'd like to talk it over. Okay, that's who was singing it. That's who they did it. So I went out there, and they were kind of country, you know, and they dressed pretty, kind of like me, you know, pretty plain. I started to apologize this morning about how I dressed, but that'd be hypocritical, because the clothes I got home are the same. Anyway. Yeah, I don't really look. But anyway, so I went and got these ladies, and I like to hear them sing too. And so I got them over there in the wing. So Brother Branham goes out, and he said, before I speak this morning, I want to have some people sing. And here they come out. These old ta-ta women were just eyes rolled back, and they looked, oh no, yeah. But anyway, they came out and sang. It was good. So after he spoke, he was in the wing, and my brother and I, you know, okay, we were standing there, and my brother always remembers this. This is why I'm relating it. It's because it was so striking to my brother. Because that morning it had a lot of emotions and manifestations, and a lot of tongues and interpretations. And my brother and I were standing there, and he said, remember, he said, salvation only comes from the Word, not all these manifestations. And my brother has never forgotten, nor I have never forgotten that. It was simple. At that time, we've heard it over and over now, but at that time we hadn't heard that like that, you know. I mean, it was striking to us. Well, now, if you read a lot, hear a lot of tapes, you hear that a lot, but we didn't hear that a lot, you know. And that was still when they believed in initial evidence and everything else, you know. He said that salvation just comes from the Word, and that alone. Amen. He said, and not manifestations. He said you can't, and he said you can't put any importance on that. It's kind of the way he put that. One time, I was up in Utah with Brother Branham. This friend of mine had just lost a child, and he's needing some money, and he needed the money for the funeral. So he called me up, and so I was going to help him. And so I was talking to Brother Branham about it, and he said, I said, I don't know, I need to either buy this colt from him, or buy a lion dog. He needs some money real bad, and he won't take a gift. He's too proud. He was a lion hunter, and he was trying to feed a family, and then government lion hunters made $600 a month, and he had 5 children. And that was what they were working for then at that time, for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And I said, he's way too proud, but he won't. It's the same man, by the way, if you hear the tape when he talks about the Jack Mormon. Yes. Same gentleman, same gentleman. And we were at his house, and I said, what do you think I ought to do? And he said, well, you ought to get that dog. I said, all right. So he said, let's go down to the saddle shop. I said, why? He said, you know that story you told me about your saddle? You got in a bind and got out of money and you sold your saddle a long time ago? I said, yeah. He said, I think it might be in that saddle shop downtown. I said, that was 4 or 5 years ago. And it was about 60 miles from here, you know. He said, well, let's just go over there and have a look. And I walked in and my saddle's sitting there on the rack, you know. And I thought, he said, well, that's pretty reasonable, isn't it? Well, let's just get it. And I got my saddle back after all those years. And then, so I go back home, and Jerry says, why don't you take the colt? Brother Branham nudges me. He just told me to take the dog. And I thought, well, Jerry said, I'd rather you take boy, I need that dog. Brother Branham nudges me. I said, I think I better take that dog. And he said, he said, well, think about it. I said, all right. So that afternoon he says, will you take this horse? I said, yeah, I'll take it. Brother Branham, the room, he says, I think I'd have taken the dog. Well, I'll tell you right now that I won't go to a long story, but that colt had one problem after another and ended up crippled. And the dog went to a real good friend of mine, and he was good, and every day of his life I envied him. Every 10, 12 years I wish I had that dog. Anyway, I didn't listen, and I should have. One time, I'll tell you how dumb I was. Of course, everybody, that's pretty apparent anyway, but I was really foolish. Brother Branham's trying to give me a hint. I dove hunted with Bob Ford. I don't know if any of you know Bob Ford in Jeffersonville? Old man? Yes. He looks like Colonel Sanders? Yeah. But he don't have chicken? Yeah. Well, anyway, Bob and I, we went good dove hunting every day. And so Brother Branham, he didn't like it, see, but I didn't know it. Nobody had ever told me. And I had an old man that had the palsy from France and had been in World War I, and I gave him the doves. And I thought I was doing a good duty, and I'd take a couple of young ones, give him, I think the limit might have been 20 a day, I guess. Well, I'd take about 2 and have Mom cook them for my breakfast, and I would just give him the rest. And him and his wife would eat on them, and I thought it was a good deal. I was just, and so Brother Branham was trying to tell me, and he says, we don't shoot doves. I said, I do. Oh, and then about halfway home, I thought, oh, you dummy. You dummy. He was trying to tell you something. So I go over to Bob Ford's, and I say, Bob, we can't hunt doves anymore. He said, well, you may not, but I'm going to. He said, why? I said, Brother Branham said we don't hunt doves. I said, I'm not going to shoot any more doves. Right. He said, well, I'm going to. I said, okay, because he's stubborn as I was, and kind of cantankerous and everything. And so, he was. Yeah, he was. I mean, he's not now. He's in the message and everything now, but he was kind of raunchy then. I remember he used to get after people with shovels and knives and stuff. He was pretty mean. But anyway, he said, well, I'm not quitting. So when I saw Brother Branham, I said, man, I said, I'm really sorry. I didn't understand what you're trying to tell me about the doves. I won't shoot anymore. He said, oh, yeah. He said, and he was telling me about the Holy Spirit's like a dove. Yeah. So we're standing out there, and he said it's like you got this dove on your shoulder, and if you do something, he says the Holy Spirit's sensitive, and if you offend it, he'll fly up on this little limb, but he won't be far. Yeah. But then you get everything right, and he'll come back. And he went just like this. And so I didn't realize he was trying to tell me that the representative of the Holy Spirit, and up here I'm just blazing away at him, you know. And so I couldn't wait to tell my dad. And so Dad, he was too tight to buy the shells, so he didn't have to worry. He won't buy any shotgun shells, they're too high. But anyway, I was going to tell Dad just in case he did, you know, break loose with a few shekels. I was going to tell him we can't do it, you know. And so I was standing. Dad had a trailer park in South Phoenix at the time, and we're standing outside working on something. And I said, Dad, you know, Brother Branham, and I was telling my dad this story. I said, Brother Branham was telling me about not shooting doves, and I said, I just blustered right over, well, I do. And then I had to apologize, and then I said, here's what he was telling me. Well, and please, brothers and sisters, I of all people, I won't try to make something of myself. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm just witnessing what happened. Sure. And I'm not trying to be something, you know, because I know I'm not. But I was telling my dad this story. You know, in Arizona, you have Sonora doves, and you've got mourning doves, and then you got white wings.
Yeah.
But a pure white dove landed on my shoulder. My dad looks at me, and I was afraid to move. And he says, is that a pet? And I says, no, Dad, I had never seen it before. And it flew up to a limb. And he says, my. And it flew back and landed on my shoulder. He said, what's the deal? I said, I don't know. I don't know. And then it flew away. And, you know, I don't think we talked about it for about 12 years or 15. My dad says, do you ever remember that white dove? He said, did you ever think about that? I said, I think about it quite a bit, Dad. Yeah. But anyway, sometimes, you know, we can be blustering through and not be sensitive enough for things, you know. Yeah. I was pretty bad about that, and it made you think how callous we can be, you know, and how thoughtless.
That's right.
One time I was in. How long do you want me to do this?
Keep going. You want me to quit?
No.
Okay.
Well, you just tell me, all right? Because there's a bunch of. I haven't even hardly got down
I
to the
know.
line.
We got that. Yeah.
One time I was in Strawberry Lodge, and it was cold, and I had an old International Scout. And if anybody ever had them, they have the lousiest defroster known to man. It takes about 35, 40 minutes if it's a frosted day. And I had this old Scout, and I'd already loaded the dogs. And so I had a great big wart on my thumb. And it wasn't hurting. It was just a nervous habit I had, and I was sitting there wanting this. It was about 4:35 in the morning, and we're sitting there and waiting on this defroster and everything, and I'm rubbing. I got that nervous habit, and I'm thinking, you know, I wish this thing would hurry up. He said, what are you doing? I said, oh, nothing. It's just a dumb habit. In a couple minutes, I was doing it again, and I didn't know it, you know. And he said, what are you doing? I said, nothing. And the third time he reached over and he took my thumb like that. That's all he did. He didn't say one word. When he took his hand off, I didn't have a wart there. And it's been a slick, and I never had it. It never came back, and there's no scar there either. It was just gone. And all he did is touch, so he never said one thing. It was gone. And I just sit there and looked. And I looked at him. He just smiled. It was gone, you know. So the next day, we went down through a barn. We were staying in number 4 room at Strawberry Lodge. Lester Gray, this guy that had managed Strawberry Lodge, was a real good friend of mine, and I would run a ticket for every hunter. And when my hunter would pay, I would pay my ticket, because we'd get our meals there, have our room, get our flats fixed, because I had a lot of flats. And we would get gas and everything. And then I'd just get my hunt, pay up with him, and go to the next person. Well, Strawberry at that time, it had... he had a barn down below, and I kept my dogs in the straw. So when I went by this one dog I had, he was an Airedale dog named Hobo. He was begging to go, and he'd been real sick, and he was passing blood, and I knew he was weak, and he couldn't eat. And I thought he was going to die, and I'd always let him go. But that day he begged to go, and I said, you can't go today. And he cried a real pitiful cry, and I walked on by, and Brother Branham stopped by him. He just stopped. I selected the other dogs I was going to take that day, and usually I take one pack and rest the other half, and then the next day I reverse them so they're always fresh. And he said, why don't you let him go? I said, I can't. He's sick. He's not going to make it. He's too weak to make the day. If we get on a long chase, he won't even make it back, and he's too heavy to carry, and I don't want to carry him. And I'm just not going to take him. I went on through and let my dogs loose, and he's still standing there. He said, why don't you let him go? I said, let him go. So he unsnaps him. I went outside, put him in the scout, and we went to where we're hunting. And the dog got out to clean out, and he was just quivering and shaking and passing blood. And I said, I was kind of telling him, I was kind of explaining to him why I wasn't going to let the dog go. I said, see, that's why I didn't bring him. And he walked over to him like this. And he put his hand right over his hips. And he didn't say anything. And he said he'll be all right. And that dog, he was 5. That dog lived when he was 11. At 6 o'clock one night, I was with a rancher, and the rancher shot a lion in a low cedar tree, and he didn't do a very good job. And the lion jumped on me, and Hobo went up and took the lion's bite in front of my throat. And the lion killed him at 11. And he never had another sick day until the day the lion killed him.
Saved your life.
And he saved me at that age of 11. And Brother Branham just touched him and said he'd be all right. And my dog was healed. He went on that day, never missed another meal. And he told me never sell the dog. I didn't tell you that too. He said, don't ever sell that dog. I said I won't. And that's what he told me that day. He said, don't ever sell that dog. You know good and well what he saw.
Yeah.
He saw it sitting in the barn before I wouldn't take him. He really saw it then.
My. Saved your life.
One time, one of the 2 times, other than that first time I told you, the only 2 times that anybody else went was once with Alan Mosley and once with Welch Evans. But the Mosleys were my friends, and we were visiting a lot, and they had asked me to go with Brother Branham, and I said, well, I know, a lot of people ask me that, and I'm not trying to keep you from him or anything, but he only told me not to ever tell anybody where and when we're going, and not to give his number to anybody, and never tell anybody, and I never have, and I never will. But they were good friends, and as you know, they had given Brother Branham the Jeep. They had made a Jeep and given it to him, and they loved him dearly, and they talked to me often, and Alan was one of my bosom friends, before he was killed. And so he says, why don't you ask him? I said, I will. And I love the other boys too, but I did like Alan better. You know how you are. You just have some people you just get along with a little better. And the other boys are fine boys too, not to say they aren't. But I just really did like Alan and got along with him a lot. And I don't know, he said, well, tell Alan he can go. I said, all right. I said, but he's seeding rice up in Northern California, but he's going to fly down and meet us in Utah whenever I tell him. He said, well, don't have him come now because there's going to be a real bad storm. And it was just perfectly sunny, you know. He said, there's going to be a real bad storm, and he couldn't fly in there. I said, all right, I'll tell him. I said, Alan, you can go, but you can't come. He says, what do you mean? He said, I'm coming. I said, no. And he says, I can fly in any weather. I said, no, don't come. So Brother Branham came and met me over here at the house and parked his Jeep out in front, and then we always put the dogs in my truck, and then we leave. And that day, my mother had a pot of chili on, and she said, he never came in. We usually just met outside and leave. And she said, I got a new apple pie done, or cherry, I don't remember which, and a pot of chili. I asked him if he wants a bowl before you go, so you don't have to stop along the way. And I said, I don't think he will, but I'll ask him. He said, yeah, that'd be all right. So we went in, and he sat there and he told me, he said, you know, something's going to happen on this trip that I'm not going to like. I'm not going to enjoy it. I said, well, Brother Branham, that's easy. Let's just don't go. I said, I don't want you to not be happy. He said, oh, you don't understand. If you see a vision, it has to happen. We couldn't help not going if we wanted to. I already saw it. It's going to happen. I said, well, let's just stay home. No, that isn't how it works, see. I was just going to save him the unhappiness. But he said, no, we have to go or then it's going to be wrong. So he told me what it was, 2 things. And so we went to Utah, and it was real pretty all the way up there, nice and sunny. And we got in this little room, and he gave me a book. Now, this might seem strange to you. Here I'm with the prophet, but he gives me a book, and I can't put the book down. And I'm right there. We're on twin beds. I could have talked to him out of my heart, but I couldn't put this book down. A prophet visits South Africa. I can't believe this, man. Yeah. And I'm reading this book, and he's right, and he said, well, you can read that later. I said, no, I can't. But anyway, I remembered him giving me that, and I couldn't put it down. So he said, you call Alan, tell him not to come, because he's going to be antsy and going to come anyway. So I called him in California. I says, you better not come. He says, is it storming? I said, nope, it's very pretty. He said, I'm on my way. I said, you better not. So he called the weather service, and they said it was fine. He called me back, I'm coming. I said, no, you can't come, Alan. He said, man, I waited for this, and I waited for it, and I'm coming. I said, no, you better not. So he didn't. And sure enough, we woke about midnight. It was about a foot of snow already, and it was thick. It was one of those horizontal blizzards. He couldn't have made it 10 feet, you know. Well, anyway, I called him when it settled down, and he came on down, and we got this line. Well, I'd found a little set of line tracks, and I said, and I knew Brother Branham was wanting a bigger one, and so if we got a small one, he'd just pass on it anyway, so I figured, why tree it? So we went all day long, caught a bobcat, and it was too little. And we let it go. And that night, I said, well, we got that line track. We can go run it for fun if you want to. It's little, but it's the only thing we found today. He didn't say anything. And Alan said, yeah, let's go do it. He didn't say anything, and I didn't pick up on it, you know. And so I went over and turned my dogs on it and treated it. And Alan had a big old gun there, and he shot a big hole in it, and he didn't like it. It was a pretty little line. It was just a yearling. So he said, well, I'm not going to take that little line. I said, well, I know that. But Alan said, I'll take it. He said, I'd like you to have it. I said, all right, take it. So the next night, there was 2 of them. And I knew that sibling would be looking for its mate there the next day. So we went hunting the next day, didn't find any lion. I said, well, that other lion will be right there. I imagine I can catch it tonight. It was kind of on the way back into the motel. So I stopped by, dumped my dogs out, and treated it. Well, I decided I'd just have some fun, so I climbed up in this tree and kicked this lion out. And I just kicked it in the chest and knocked it out. And I felt so bad. I'm down there hissing my dogs, and they're choking this lion. And, you know, Brother Branham, he liked things killed humanely and quickly. And my dogs are choking it, and I'm down there hissing them and everything. And it fires your dogs up, see? So I'm down there training dogs, and I looked up, and he had a bad look on his face. And I thought, oh, I'm in trouble. He don't like this. But he already told me he wouldn't like it. And I'm down there letting him choke this lion. And I couldn't get him off then. As you know, you can't undo it. It's already a big mess. It's a big wreck. You know, what could I do? I couldn't undo it. I just had to take my medicine, you know. I thought, oh, man, he's mad at me, you know. Anyway, so I just goofed up. But anyway, they killed that lion. So I realized he didn't like it. And he told me later, he said, I like them killed where they don't suffer, you know. Just if you're going to kill something, kill it, you know. Don't do that. He said, that thing choked for 20 or 30 minutes, and you were liking it. I said, yeah, I know. I'm sorry, you know. Anyway, so he kind of got after me about that deal. So I learned about that. And I'm going to pass over some of this because I know it's long, but I'll do one more. This is very striking to me. In 1965, the construction strike hit here in Arizona, and my brother and I were working road construction, and we're out of work. And I got a chance to go to Oregon to hunt bear for the Forest Service, so I just went up there and hunted bear. And somebody has to do it, you know. And so I went up there and killing these bear out of the fur forest, and I had missed Brother Branham because, see, it's a first period of a long time that I didn't get to be with him. And I've been up there all summer, and I want to describe this situation, and you'll see why it's so striking to me. My brother was married. I was single. My brother had a wife and a daughter. And they had a little house in Gresham, Oregon, between Gresham and Mount Hood. And I had my dogs tied under some pear trees, and they had a lean-to on the back, which was kind of my way, you know. And I lived in this utility lean-to. I had a cot, and, you know, what else do you need, you know? And so I lived in this, me and the hot water heater out there in this little deal, and in the back of the house. And my sister-in-law would do my laundry and cook for me, and then I stand out there. Well, they lived on a hill, and up at the top of this hill, maybe 500 yards away, was a supermarket with a paved parking lot, and in the corner of the parking lot, out by the sidewalk, was a telephone booth. Well, I was laying there thinking, man, I'm going to go back to Arizona. I can't see Brother Branham, and I caught all these bears for the forest. There's no more bear up here in this forest. I'm going to go, and the construction strike wasn't over, and I didn't know I was going to make a living, but I decided I was going to go home. And I'll be honest with you, I was kind of lonesome and stuff, and I was sitting there. It's about 10 o'clock at night. And I was laying on my cot. And my sister-in-law came to the back door, and she said, Dawson, you got somebody at the door. I said, there's no way. Nobody knows me. How could there be somebody at your door? No human in this whole town knows me. And nobody knows I live here, and we don't have a telephone. Said, I don't know, but there's somebody asking for you. I said, well, Bonnie, I don't know anybody. I'm not getting up. She says, come to the door and see what he wants. So I go to the door, and this guy says, "Hey, you got a phone call up there at the parking lot." I said, "I don't have a phone call. You're crazy. I don't even know the number of my own self." He said, "Look, man, I don't care if you take it or not. I'm just walking by, and I don't even know why I answered it. I answered the phone." And he said, "Go down the hill and ask for Dawson." I said, "You're out of your mind." He said, "No, there's somebody up there." I said, "Who? I don't know who it is." "Well, I don't even care if you answer it." I said, "Well, I don't either." He said, "But he did ask for you. Is your name God?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "All right." So I walk up this hill, and I pick up the phone, and Brother Billy said, "Dawson, Daddy wants to talk to you." And he said, "How you doing?" I said, "Pretty good." He says, "No, you're not." He said, "You're not doing very good, are you?" I said, "No, sir." He said, "I was on my way to Canada, and I thought you needed a little cheering up." He said, "Why don't you meet me down there, and let's go on another hunt pretty soon when I get back from Canada." I said, "Okay, sir, I will." And I just wanted to share that with you. It meant a lot to me. Well, I got 2 more pages. I don't even bother about that. That's enough time, my friend. I'm sorry I took that.
No, don't be sorry.
Well, it's a privilege being here with you, and I hope maybe somebody got something that would help you. And you pray for me, and I'm going to start my next season, and I obviously need a lot of prayer. So I'd covet your prayers, and God bless you very much. Good to see you.
Being around that gift, like I was, like Brother Dawson was, like different ones, when you'd start to tell him the dream, he'd stop you. Tell you the whole dream from beginning to end, how he was laying, how he had his hat pulled down, what the horses meant and everything. Lets us know that same God is alive today. And it gives us such faith to walk on. God knows that you might be living on a little lean-to, and there's a telephone line right up there, and he can get a hold of you anytime he wants. He's still the same. Brother Branham spent his ministry preaching to us, Hebrews 13:8. Jesus Christ the same yesterday, today, and forever. Now that same God knows where we're at today, where we're going to be tomorrow. Our steps are ordered of the Lord, and it gives me great comfort to know that my Jesus, and Cynthia Wednesday night made an outstanding statement. It says the Word, and says Jesus is here. The Word is here. And Jesus is here. The Word right now. They're one. So whatever you have need of, if you need healing, ask Him to heal you right now. If you have any need in your body, you ask that presence that's here right now. That's how Brother Dawson got healed. That's how God healed me. I was miraculously touched Monday, deathly sick. And I kept saying, God, you're healing me right now. You're healing me right now. And I come home to service Wednesday night, and God, you've got to claim it. You've got to go claim it. God knows where you're at. He's a healer. He paid for all of this. So these things we tell to, doesn't it help your faith? See, if he knowed where a little old mountain lion hunter was, sleeping in a lean-to, knew when that guy was going to be walking by. I don't know why I answered the phone.
Yeah. Amen.
And it's all ordained of the Lord. And that's how our life is. If you can take comfort in knowing that your life is so ordained of the Lord Jesus Christ. that our life does not. We're just not bebopping along. And He don't know where we're at and what's going on. And I count it a real privilege for you children to hear. Just see, these are spiritual hunting stories. Just like David killed a lion. David killed the bear. And different things. See, God has everything under His control. And I thank Dawson for taking the time to come by. In fact, Lord willing, this May, he's going to help me get me a bear. And Lord, if you don't help me, don't help that bear. If we take Joshua along, we call him bear bait. Brother Dawson. Everyone stand up and look at Joshua. That's what we call bear bait, because they really like him. And they smell him out, no matter where he's at. But did you enjoy that? And it's a keepsake. It's a joy to hear those things. And why we've got men alive that can tell the testimony. And that's just a few, folks. He didn't even touch a lot of them. But Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And God sent that gift so it would help our faith in this last day. And will I find faith when Yeah, He's going to find faith. There's going to be faith in the bride of Jesus Christ. She's going to have the faith of Jesus Christ. Let's all stand. Donald, come and lead us some songs. And oh, don't you feel refreshed to know that He's the same yesterday, today, and that same presence that was with that prophet is here. And if you'll look for Him, you can begin to catch Him in the things that He wants you to catch Him. So, God bless you. Well, I'm back. We want to hear them other two pages that we didn't get this morning. Brother Lynn, Sister Carol, good to see you all. So we'll just stand at this time and sing our Only Believe song and ask Brother Dawson just to come. And this is better than Paul Harvey's stories. So you're going to get the rest of the story tonight. And how I so immensely enjoyed what I heard, and how it rang true. Had a true sound to it, didn't it? Only
be here tonight. You were very gracious this morning, and I enjoyed being here. And I was going to have a nice nap and relax this afternoon until he told me I was going to get back up here, and it kind of fouled up my nap. But anyway, I wrote down a few notes here of things that I didn't touch on this morning. And I just jotted them down as they came to my mind. They're in no particular order. And I don't know that I have, sir? I don't know that I have recall enough to put them in the proper sequence anyway. It's been a long time, as you know. But I will go through this list and tell you some more experiences I had. I'd like to take a moment and pray before I do. Dear loving God, we thank you tonight. Lord, I ask that you help me to recall accurately, Lord, and to say just the way it was. and not change anything, Lord, because you know I hold it important and I don't want to make a mistake. I've written this down the best I can. I ask that you come and bless it, Lord, and may I express what's on my heart. I thank you for these things. Bless this company of people, and we'll give you the praise in Jesus Christ's name. Amen. I had a sister ask me this morning if I would tell the young people and maybe the people that hadn't the opportunity to meet Brother Branham some of his characteristics and what it was like to be around him. And I've tried to jot down a few things that I was struck by, and as I get to them, I'll try to do that. Of course, the main thing that I did when I was with him was hunting, so most of them are around the hunting stories, so those of you that don't care about that will have to bear with me, because that's just what we were doing. And so that's all I can tell you is what we did. One time I had a particular problem this day. I had a client, and usually I told him to go home, but this time I had another outfitter with me, and he had brought the client. And so I said, so Brother Branham rode with me, and this client rode with the other outfitter, and I said, what am I going to do? I think we're going to hit a lion where I'm going, and I know I was bringing you for it, and this guy thinks he's going to get it. I don't know what we're going to do. He says, I wouldn't worry about it. And so we went out there. It was a long walk. It was up by Four Peaks, right here, over here by Four Peaks. And we had walked quite a while, and the dogs hit a lion, and I ran down there and looked. It was a pretty big track, and I said, oh, this is a nice lion. I said, back to the deal. What are we going to do? He says, just let him work it. And he says, we'll enjoy it. I don't have to kill it anyway. So, anyway, the dogs worked this lion, and they started getting better and better, and I knew they were going to catch it. I mean, it was sounding good. I liked the sound of it, you know. And I said, hey, they're going to jump him right in that canyon. So they spilled over this lip of the canyon, and this other guy said, is that good? I said, yeah, that's pretty good. So Brother Branham asked me the funniest question. Here I am. I got real nice lion dogs, and I'm proud of how broke they are. You know, they don't chase deer. They don't chase all these things. And he says, do your dogs ever run coyote? And I said, well, I've broken most of them off of it, but yeah, all of them had to be broken off coyote pretty much. Why do you ask? He said, I just wanted to know if they ran them. So they went off in this canyon at which I knew we were about to jump this lion, and I looked over on the other bank, and there's a coyote's running out of the bottom of that canyon. He heard the dogs too, and so he ran up, and some of my dogs looked over to him, and they started chasing him. And I was embarrassed, of course, but it took the pressure off. We didn't have to waste the lion, you know, with this regular client, you know. So my dogs chased the coyote, so I cut them off. I had the angle on them, and I cut it off, and I started catching my dogs. And I was young then, and I knew I could run. And I caught those dogs, and I was giving a whipping, and Brother Branham came up to me, and he says, that's enough, don't you think? I was getting into it, you know, because I don't think they were supposed to run it. They just ran it to solve our problem. And he says, I think that's enough. I said, okay. And so I kind of let up on him. But that guy says, that other outfitter, he says, man, I thought sure we had that lion. Anyway, I thought it was kind of a funny way to get out of my problem, you know. And he knew before. See, he knew before what was going to happen, and I hadn't an idea. It was just something that I wanted to write down and tell you about. On the tape that Brother Branham talks about the Jack Mormon, who was my friend. He was a government hunter. Anyway, one day we were standing around. It was the day after we had the discussion I told you about this morning about the dog versus the horse. Well, Jerry came in, and he was a man of few words. In fact, he wasn't even very easy to get along with. He was just a real good lion hunter. He wasn't much of a, he didn't have any personality, but he was a nice guy. I mean, he was a good dog. No, he wasn't a nice guy. He was a good dog trainer. But anyway, he really understood a hound. He just didn't understand people, which I understand that too. But anyway. So this Jerry comes up and he said, "Dawson, does your friend ever help people out like this?" I says, "What do you mean?" I said, "Yeah, but I usually don't bother him with stuff. What do you got? What are you talking about?" He said, "Do you know Val?" I said, "Yeah." Well, Jerry's father had passed away, and he had a younger brother, and his dad had asked him before he left, because he knew Jerry saw no value in education at all, and didn't care about it. But Val, his father, had wanted Val to have an education, and he was a very devout Mormon. Not Jerry, but his younger brother. And I don't think Jerry ever went to church, ever, except to his funeral, a couple of funerals for his children. He never went to church that I knew about. But Val was very devout, and he wanted to go to BYU. Well, it took a lot of money, and Jerry wasn't making much, and so I told him I'd help him. And we'd take some extra lion hunters on the side. It was not illegal at the time for a government hunter to guide on the side, and so I helped him. I said, "We'll just take 2 or 3 hunters a year and help pay your tuition, and I'll do it that way." And so Val got very sick, and he was in the hospital. It's a very small hospital. If you're ever in the town of Salina, Utah, it's just a little brick building, a little rock building. It's, 4 or 5 rooms, and he said he's going to have an operation in the morning. And he said, I was just wondering if he'd pray for him. I was shocked. This man didn't even like preachers, and at first he got after me for bringing a preacher up there the year before. And so he said, will you talk to him? I said, sure. So Brother Branham came up, and we were walking around out by some trees, and I said, we walked away from the house. I said, Jerry's brother, Val, he's in the hospital for an operation in the morning. And he asked me if you ever prayed out here like this. He said, you go have him go down to the hospital and bring him right now. Well, he was in a smock and everything. They says, you can't take him out. He says, I didn't ask you. Where is he? I'm the one paying me. I'm his guardian. I'll take him out if I want to. They said, well, he's already prepped for the operation, so I don't care. So he brings him out. It's about 3 or 4 blocks down there, and he takes him out, and Brother Branham takes his hat off, and he prays a simple prayer. So he turned around, and I followed him away, and he said, tell him not to let him cut on him. He said he's healed. And so I turned around, and I said, Jerry, don't let him operate. He doesn't need it. He said, no, wait a minute, are you sure? I said, I'm sure, Jerry. I'm real sure. I said, I'm sure enough that I can tell you right now, they won't find it when they look. Tell them to look first. Approach it that way. So he went back, took him back in, and he said, whatever you do, I'm not authorizing this. I know I signed it, tear it up. You have him examined by another doctor in the morning and get some new x-rays. Do not touch him. So the next morning, they couldn't find anything. So they turned him loose. And so Jerry came up to me and he said, you know, it works. He said, it works, you know that? I said, yeah, it does. And I said it thousands of times, Jerry. I said, it works a lot, He says, oh, it works, So anyway, so Val came back and went to BYU. And one day he was in I'm going to call it the inner sanctum. He was in a library that the books could not be checked out. They had to be read right there and put right back under this glass case. And he was reading where a heretic got kicked out of the Mormon church. And there's a book called The Mormon Word of God. And on page 55 it says, In the last days, my servant William Branham will come down the West Coast, healing, preaching, and doing miracles in my name. And Val testified to me it was in that book in the BYU library. And they kicked the man out for being a heretic. So, anyway, Val himself told me that. And by the way, Val is the superintendent of the largest coal mine in Utah today. He's very well, he's been very successful, and he's done a real good job. He's not an old dumb lion hunter, you know. He's done really well, and he's still healthy. That's a long time. One time, we were at this Strawberry Lodge, and as I told you this morning, it was my custom to have a client in, run the week, and then pay my bill. Well, my client was there about 3 days, and I ran up a bill, and I didn't pay him because I couldn't charge the guy because I told him to go home, so I didn't have any money. So I had zero money. I think I had $27, and I owed my bill there. And so Lester comes around real discreet, and he says, "Hey, Tina says you didn't pay up on the last client." I said, "Tina's right. She's exactly right." He says, "Well, when you gonna collect off this guy?" He called Brother Branham this guy, you know. He said, "You gonna collect off this guy and pay them both?" I says, "That's not exactly," I knew I wasn't going to charge him, so I couldn't tell him I was going to do that. So I says, "That's not exactly what I had in mind. I had in mind the next guy I'll pay all three." He says, "No, that's not our deal. I want my money. In fact, you're going to pay it right now." So he sails in there to Tina. He says, "Print me up this." So she goes, gets me tears off this receipt, and he gives it to me. And he puts it in my pocket. Hard. He stuffs it. He said, "I want it today." I said, "Man, you've never done this before. I've never not paid you." And I said, "Man, we've been friends 4 years. I don't have it." He said, "You collected, I know." And I didn't tell him anything. And I didn't tell him, it was none of his business that I wasn't going to collect this time, you know, so I didn't say anything. So I thought, man, what am I going to do? And so about 10 minutes, Brother Branham comes up to me. And I'm watching these two Frenchmen that he had fixing flats. And I wanted to make sure there was really a nail in my tire because I didn't trust him too much. And so I was checking it out, you know, because I had flats every day. And I always accused Lester of driving up that gravel road by Strawberry and throwing nails out because it was good business, you know. And I told him, I said, if I ever get a brand new nail, I'm not paying for that flat, you know. So anyway, I was watching these Frenchmen fix a tire, and Brother Branham comes up and he said, let me help you out a little. I said, "No, I don't need any money." He said, he said, "You know, this kind of adds up." And I said, "No, sir, I don't need a dime. I'm fine." He looks at me and said, "Well, I'd sure like to help you." I said, "No, sir, it's not necessary." And he walked off, and Lester comes up and he said, "Did he pay you?" I said, "No, he didn't pay me." He said, "Well, I heard him tell you he was going to." I said, "None of that's your business, Lester. You just go run your restaurant, you know." And so pretty soon Brother Branham come back and he said, "Hey, let me help you out." I said, "Oh no, I don't need any." He said, "Well, I'd sure like to give you a little bit, at least on expenses and all." I said, "No, they're not very much, and I'll just get them." And I didn't want to tell him I didn't have any money, and so he left, and pretty soon he comes back and he stuffed a bunch of money in my pocket. Well, I hadn't even looked at the receipt, and so I walked around the building there, and there was a little mechanic's bench, and I got that money out, and I got that receipt, and it was exactly to the penny what was written down, to the very penny. I mean, it was you know, the next guy that bought the Strawberry Lodge, he was a real nice young fellow. His name was Dennis Stutzman. And he kind of got me in a little bind because his mother inherited some money, and so she bought it. And so Lester told me, he says, I'm moving to Camp Verde, and we're going to put in a Western store. We're tired of this. And he said, we're selling out to this guy. His mother got a lot of money, and he said they don't even know how much work they're going to have with a motel and the restaurant and the service station and the lodge and everything, and said, we're glad to get out of it, but he said they'll find out. So he said, I'll just tell them what kind of deal you got, and maybe they'll just keep doing it. And finally Lester did. I had to tell him that I never charged Brother Branham, and he got used to me waiting till the second guy. But anyway, old Dennis, he found out that I hunted, and so he started going with me. Well, we caught some lions, and he got all excited, and he got the fever, and that's a bad fever, you know. People don't need to be catching that, you know. But anyway, he got raging. He wanted him some dogs. I said, oh, you don't want any dogs. You know, it's not as easy as you think it is, and it looks easy when you go out there and there's a lion up there and just a few dogs, but you don't. It's hard work, and they cost a lot of money. And I tried to discourage him, and the more I told him no, he wanted to do it. So he tried to buy some dogs from me. I said, no, I'm not going to sell you any dogs. And what are you going to do? Your mother can't run this place, and if you go hunting, she's already mad at me because you're not being very responsible. Every time she hated to see me come, because if I came, he quit work. So she had it all to do. So I knew that she hated me, and I knew, and I didn't. I thought, man, Dennis, she don't even like for me to come, and I come up here all the time. I said, you got me in a mess already. So, and sure enough, she was getting worse and worse, and she was getting hard to handle for me, you know. And I'm not very tolerant of women anyway, and she was just getting on my, you know, getting under my skin, and so she wasn't very nice. But I kind of understood, you know, but I just couldn't quite understand enough. And so Brother Branham came up, and I said, boy, I don't know if we'll get served tonight. So I told him the deal. I said, whoa, I don't know if she'll serve us last. She'll be kind of rude, and she'll be real terse with her remarks. So he says, is that right? I said, yeah. I said, why? I said, well, the boy wants to go hunting, you know, and he don't want to do his job. He wants to get irresponsible, and I don't know how to solve the deal. So we came in, and she come over to take the order, and she stands like this. I'm right here, and she goes, can I have your order? What do you want? You know, that's how it was. And Brother Branham looked at it, and he said, ooh, oh. So she goes off and gets her stuff started, and she come back, and Brother Branham, he tapped my knee under the table. He says, evening, ma'am. She said, what do you do? All these guys he brings in are rich. What do you do? you know, and he looked and he said, well, I'm not rich, man. Ma'am, I'm a minister of the gospel. She looked at him, you know. She says, you know, I used to go to church. He said, you used to? That doesn't sound very good. She said, yeah, I'm ashamed of that. And so she sails off the kitchen, waits on a bunch of other people. Pretty soon she comes over there, and he said, where'd you go to church? What town was that? She says, well, that was in Indiana. He said, well, I'm from Indiana. She said, no kid. Pretty soon she's sitting down with us, and then pretty soon she's crying. And she gave her heart to the Lord, and she was super nice to me. She was so nice. And then now every time I come up there, she tried to ask me, when's your friend coming back? And so just in 5 or 10 minutes, he had her just fine. And she was not too good. I mean, it wasn't going to get better for me, I can tell you that, because I wasn't helping either. Anyway, just a little soft word turneth away wrath, you know. And those other ones don't. They don't turn away wrath, you know. We have to learn slow sometimes, you know. But anyway, what a wonderful example. I mean, and he was tender, and he was nice to her, you know. And he was thoughtful. And he showed empathy, and she knew it. It was genuine, you know. He really cared about her. He really cared about her predicament, you know. And it showed. It showed, you know. You know, I was riding along with Brother Branham, and I had done something wrong. I've told you before, I wasn't professing to be a Christian. And I had done something bad. And I was wondering how I'm going to face Brother Branham when I see him again. It was troubling. I wanted to see him, but I was afraid. And I knew that he knew, and I didn't know what to do. So I'm driving down the road, and if you've ever gone across from Page to Kanab, there's a place called Pariah Canyon. And I got so under conviction I couldn't drive. And I had a huge burden that I couldn't bear. It was so heavy, I couldn't sit there. And I couldn't see to drive. I couldn't think. Excuse me. The pressure was so great, I didn't know what I was going to do, so I pulled over to the side of the road. And I had to get out. I got out of the truck. I walked around and I hung over the right-of-way fence, several feet over there. And Brother Branham opened the truck door, but he didn't say anything. Just opened it. And I sat there with this burden and guilt and conviction. And he said, "That wasn't your fault. He said that was a trap, and you were weak. And the Lord will forgive you if you ask Him." I apologize. You know, I feel the same feelings again. They're so real to me. I feel it anew, and I can't help it. He said if you'll ask Him, He'll lift that burden. Now just think, He said He'll take that burden. And I sat right there on that fence, and I talked to the Lord about it, and I confessed it out loud. And I asked Him to forgive me, and just a ton of weight lifted. And I walked around, got in the truck, and I drove on. And he talked to me about 5 or 10 minutes about it. He just knew how to deal with every situation that you came to. And he did it so gentlemanly and so soft and so thoughtful and tender. And yet he could be stern, you know, or yet he could be gentle. But he didn't tell me how rotten I was. And he didn't beat me up about it. I was already hurting. I already knew. And sometimes I wonder if we aren't harsh on each other when we each know when we're wrong, and we know when we're bad, and our children know when they're bad, and we don't have to just keep on and hammering it on them. If we could be like that to our children and be more understanding and more
and show that love and not spite, And I thought, he could have railed on me and I would have had to stand there and take it because he would have been right. But he didn't do it that way. And so I just wanted to tell you, I wasn't proud of what I did or anything, but I've been, made a lot of mistakes in my life, and that was one of them. And anyway, it meant a lot to me the way he dealt with it. It meant a lot to me. One day I want to tell you about one of the most enjoyable days I ever remember in my life. It seemed like it was so simple and nothing was exciting, and I enjoyed it so much, and what a privilege. And if I tell you, you're going to be envious of this. You're going to be envious because it was a wonderful thing. We had gone to Sunset, just he and I, and we were camped out in the wash, and he couldn't go up by the rock in his station wagon, but he had driven from Tucson, and he had a sleeping bag in it. And we went ahead and parked it when it got rough and got in my truck, and he'd found well, I don't know if he had found it. He told me about a bobcat we were going to find, and I don't know if he had found it earlier or if he just knew it was there. You never knew, But we went up there and we trailed this bobcat, and we put it in a tree. And we were talking and making too much noise. Well, who am I to tell him we shouldn't talk and we should shut up and slip up quietly? I would never tell him that, I wasn't my place to tell him. You got to remember, I was a kid, I was young. I was a young man. And I was of all things that I can say, of my many mistakes I did make, one I didn't make. And I've been happy. I was very respectful. At least I had reverence for him. Very. And I was careful about what I said and what I did, because you couldn't help it with the feeling you felt. And I can't describe that, but you had an awe. There was a presence there, an aura that I can't describe, that you knew was very real. I'm not capable of putting it into words, but there was an imminence of I can't describe, but it caused you to reverence it. You knew not to abuse it or be harsh, if I may say. And so we were going up there, and I thought perhaps we were making a little much noise, but there's a lot of bobcats in the world, and so I didn't say anything. It jumped out. If some of you that have ever been to Sunset up there, Sunset Wash goes up there, and it has big red walls. And this tree, it was a ironwood tree, grew up, and the cat jumped out on the ledge and took off. Well, we had to walk a long ways to get the dogs around because the dogs couldn't climb the ledge, and we didn't hurry. We just talked, and we took the dogs around and got them back up there and started trailing this cat again. By that time, it took us an hour or so. This cat track was a little old, and they had to work it pretty hard, and so they're trailing, and it came up a real big thunderstorm. And it rained our track out because the cat track was pretty sensitive, a small foot, doesn't have a lot of sand in it, and the dogs were having to work, and it was just desert, old dry sand anyway, and sagebrush. So there wasn't a lot to hold the scent. And So when it rained, I knew we had lost the cat. And I said, we might as well go back to the rig and have lunch, Brother Branham. They're not going to find that cat again, and we'll lose it. You know, it got washed out. He said, yeah, no doubt it did. So we went back. And it just started like that. We went back to the truck, and he said, well, let's go down to the station wagon. I got a sleeping bag in there, and we'll just stretch out and get dry, and I got something I want to tell you. So we went down there. We went back to the truck, put the dogs in the truck, and we drove down to the station wagon. As most of you know, the Tabernacle bought him a Ford every 3 or 4 years, and it was usually black, and he drove those Ford station wagons. And this one was the same, black, and we stretched out on the sleeping bag, and I probably hadn't, you know, well, I know I hadn't cried any. I hadn't never wet an eye probably in years. And I was too hard, and I was crusty and everything. And I can tell you that Brother Branham told me his life story for 3.5 hours. And I cried from the beginning to the end. I don't know how to tell you how wonderful it was, because I've heard it on tape, I've read the books, and I've never heard it all put together like this. I heard and oh, it was such a delight. I just loved it. I don't know how he had the patience to do that for me, but it's been one of the highlights, and it was, you know, it's all I can tell you, that it was just wonderful to me. It was a privilege, and I just loved it. And I didn't know most of it. I hadn't read all the things I've read now. At that point in time, I only had a dozen tapes and a few books, you know. And so I had no way of knowing. And most of that I didn't know, and I was touched by it. And then I really saw the suffering that he went through and the pain that built that character, you know. And sometimes Brother Jim, Ed, and I were talking today, you know. It's a funny thing, but there's some of us that look back and thank the Lord for that pain and those hardships we go through. They're not fun to go through, but oh, what do they, there's something they do to you that you don't get any other way. And, you know, he had more than any of us. But we each in our own way have our burdens and our trials. And we have our things that we battle. But every one of them are for a reason. And every one of them are good for you, whether you like it or not. And I can truly say I thank the Lord for all of my hard battles that I've gone through, because I consider them a blessing to me. And if they changed my life in any way, or added to it, and anyway, I wanted to just, I didn't know how to tell you how much I enjoyed that day, but it was just priceless to me. And he said something to me. Bear in mind now, he would talk very little about spiritual things, but he broke quite a few in. But it'd be interspersed with a lot of stories and a lot of hunting. But then he would tell me things. And we were driving along, I think it was about Black Canyon City. And he said, you know, I guess you've heard about that mess up in Canada that they're baptizing in my name. I said, no, I didn't hear about that. I said, you know, I don't get around in those circles, you know. And he said, it's really hurting my ministry, and I'm going to have to get up there and straighten that out. And I'm saying, man, I'm just sitting there in my mind thinking, baptizing in his name. I hadn't heard about it, see. And he says, but you know what? They're not as far off as you think they are. I said, what do I think they are? You know, I thought they were pretty far off, you know. Anyway, it made me think a lot. And it's made me look at a lot of tapes a lot differently. But anyway, yeah, he told me they weren't as bad as I thought they were. So I want to talk to you a minute about a promise. Sometimes we make promises, and I'm not too sure we take them serious enough. Let me tell you about a promise I made and what it cost me. And I didn't think too much about it. And I think I was innocent of it, of what the results. I did not plan to break the promise. I honestly do, and I'll tell you the circumstance. Brother Branham had told me about a large lion, and we hadn't caught it yet. And he had seen it in a vision. And so one day I had an old couple booked for clients. And this old gentleman, he was a nice old man, and he says, he's about my age now. And, you know, I thought he was ready for the grave, you know. But anyway, he was old, you know, and I was a kid. And he was, you know, had gray hair and all that stuff. And not much of that. And his wife was pretty old, and he bought a book to take some pictures of a lion. I said, man, I'm your hoss. I'm the guy. Yeah, I can do it. I said, I'll catch you some lion. We'll take a lot of pictures. Well, I thought in my mind I'd probably be taking most of them myself, but I'd maybe get them to some of them. So I booked them just like a hunt, and I liked those better anyway. I didn't have to kill the lion. So I went up to Promontory Lookout, and we set up their camp trailer up on the rim, as some of you know where it is. And I had a real nice, pleasant morning that day, and my dogs trailed a lion down back east and dropped under the rim, got on a bunch of stuff, and finally caught this nice lion. It was a beautiful lion, and so I went down there and went and got him. Drove as close as I could, and I had these teeter-year-old people, you know, one on each arm, and I take them down there, and they take a bunch of pictures, and the lion I jumped it out so it'd get in another tree so we could get some more pictures. So I think I got it in 5 or 6 trees for him that day. And so I thought, you know, that lion might be the one in the vision. So I went and had them pay me and took them home. And they said, well, we thought we were going to stay here 5 days. I said, well, you've hired me for pictures, and you got your pictures, and I'll have another hunter here in the morning. I wanted to call Brother Branham and see because I could catch that lion again. So I went down and put a dog on it to stay all night. I took Boots down there and I put him on it, and I knew he'd hold him up in the tree all night. So I went back and called Brother Branham. I said, maybe, you know, I don't know if that's it or not. He said, no, that's not it. He said, did it have a bunch of scars on it? I said, no, sir. I said, it was real clean. He said, that wasn't it. I said, okay, thank you. So I had to go get my dog, and he was a long ways. So when I saw Brother Branham next time, I said, well, I'll tell you what. I was over in Promontory Canyon, which is another canyon west, and I think I really did get this lion this time. I said, it was bigger than that one, it had scars. He said, well, I don't know. He said, I don't know. So I said, okay, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll promise you I won't kill him. Because usually a lion hunter, when you remember a good lion, you take your next paying guy, and that one, he's history, you know. I said, I promise you I won't go to Promontory Canyon. He said, well, that's fine. He said, but, you know, you don't have to. I said, no, I'll just let him, and just in case it's him, I won't go there. So it was about 3 months later, and I was running a bear way away from there. In some way or another, this bear got into Promontory Canyon, and I got to the lip of it, and I went, oh, I'm not supposed to be here. And I got scared. I said, oh, I promised I wouldn't do this. And a drunk woman killed every one of my dogs on a coin that ran. They ran across the road chasing the bear, and she got, I don't know how you can get all of them, but she got them all. How do you do it? You know, you could get one or two. She got them all. She got all four of them. Killed all my dogs. And just because I went where I wasn't supposed to be, I should not have been there. And I knew it. I knew when I got there, I was scared. When I got to the lip of it, I thought, I promised the prophet I would not go here. And I did. And I got my dogs killed. And I'll tell you something, I grieved over it too. And it took me a long time to train up some more dogs. It takes a long time, a lot of work. But I took that promise too lightly, and I wasn't paying attention. I let those dogs out too close to that canyon. You know, bears can go a long ways, and they did. It did. It went right to it. Anyway, I got all my dogs killed by that drunk. And she was down there crying. I felt sorry for her. She said, I killed your dogs. I know. I see them. I just want my collars back, you know. And so she says, well, I didn't mean it. I said, well, I didn't tell her it wasn't her fault, you know. It's mine, you know. I didn't even get mad at her. What could I do, you know? She wasn't supposed to be driving, but I wasn't supposed to be there either, you know. One time, Brother Branham and I got a big, nice lion up by, it was halfway between Camp Verde and, the power plant down there, somewhere or another between Strawberry and Camp Verde. On my memory, I've been hunting in Arizona for 20 years, and some of those places get a little bit dim, but I can't remember. Calf Pin Canyon, that's where it was, Calf Pin Canyon. And we caught a real nice lion. And so we didn't measure it. So I skinned it, put it in the freezer. So the next day, these hunters came in, and they had this pretty nice lion. And they measured it in front of us. And it was 9'4". You know, I remember that. It was big. It was big. But he looked at me and he said, "It's as big as ours?" I says, "No, sir." He said, I was thinking the same thing. I said, "Ours was a little bigger." He says, "When they leave, let's measure ours." I said, "All right." He says, "I think ours is about 9'8". And that's what it was. When I put the tape on, it was 9'8". I thought, whoa. He said, "I think ours is about 9'8". Well, how could you know? It's wadded up, and you know. Oh man, we didn't think about how long it was. You know. Yeah, I think it's about 9'8", and that's exactly what it was. And that impressed me quite a bit. One day, another really fun day. It seems like it was boring. If I told you that we were going to sort guns in the duplex, sorting all of his guns to decide which ones were going to go in the new den, it doesn't sound very exciting. It was exciting. It was really fun. And I mean, he told me the story of every one of his guns. And of course, I liked that. I mean, he knew every one of them. Who gave them to him? He said, "I didn't buy any of these. Every one was a gift." And now listen carefully to this. This is impressive. He says, so we're in this duplex. You remember when he rented the duplex before he moved in when they were building the den? So we have these guns all paired. He said, "I'm going to put this one in here," and he tells me all these stories. So he says, "Well, we're working hard. Let's go to lunch." So we went down to Mexican food at Tucson somewhere. I can't remember where. It didn't matter. But we went down to ate. And on the way down, now listen to me. He says, "You know, most of those guns, it's just like UPS would pull up and the guy would get out and hand me Seiko Finbear 270 from Sweden. And it would, Finland, from Finland. And he said, and it would be from a brother who loves you, and it would be anonymous." And he said, most of them like that, sort of like that. So we went on and ate, and we came back. And he said, "What was that pulled up in front?" Well, you couldn't hear what pulled up in front. We were in the back, you know. I said, "I don't know, I'll go out and look." The UPS guy gets out, and he brings me a box that's obviously a rifle, and he says, "Bill Branham?" I said, "Yes, sir, I'll sign for it." He said, we opened it up. It was a Seiko Finbear 270. And it was anonymously signed from a brother in Finland. He told me that 3.5 hours before it got delivered. Exact to the description. It was even UPS. I mean, it was amazing. I couldn't believe it. I sit there. I couldn't wait to get it open. I knew it was. I knew it was going to be one. I knew, and he didn't have any. He didn't have any of those in there. I mean, it was unbelievable to me. I was exhilarated, you know. I couldn't wait. And he looked at me and he said, "They think I don't know who's in it." So, I was at, oh, I know how he confused me one day. I mean, he confused me. You know, I'm not even trying to figure out mysteries or anything, and I don't know about anything. I like some stuff simple, you know. And he starts telling me, he gives me a walk down Sunset. And the rocks were fresh. The rocks were fresh. And he showed them to me. They had just come down, and oh man, destruction. Those trees were leveled off, and we're walking down there, and I knew how that had to sound loud. I saw where it was torn off, and all these tri-colored rocks from this big to this big were all over the place, like a pyramid. It was unbelievable. And I'm just almost speechless anyway. And he takes a little rock, and he throws it up, and he said, talking about this dragon whipping its tail and causing destruction, and I was all confused, and so I didn't know what to do. I just left it alone, you know, and I went about the dragon's tail and stuff. And so, you know, I felt pretty ignorant, you know, which I was, and so anyway, the next day I got on a Greyhound bus. I don't remember where I was going. But I went on this Greyhound bus, and there was a paper sitting there. And I picked it up, and Alaska, man, it was all in the headlines and pictures and big devastation. I knew where the dragon whipped its tail now. All of a sudden, I figured that out, you know. I wasn't near as dumb as I was the day before. I couldn't believe it. He told me that little rock started it. And I couldn't believe it, you know. I mean, I in my mind, that just doesn't seem right, that you can start an earthquake throwing a little rock about that big, you know. And he knew it was coming. I didn't have a clue, you know. I was just shocked, so I couldn't hardly wait to ask him. I already knew. I already knew, but I had to ask him anyway to make sure I wasn't off on some fairy tale, you know. He just rocked his head, you know. That kind of stuff it affects you. You never get away. You never lose remembrance of that, you know. And it was different, I can tell you right now, because I was having trouble putting all that together. You know, I was telling you about the dog this morning that he told me that wasn't my best dog, and his name was Eli, my one he liked, and he was right. And as I got to studying, it didn't take very long until I realized he was quite a bit better. But anyway, he told me not to sell the dog. And I said, because some lion hunters, it's kind of a poor way to make a living, and sometimes you get offered a lot of money for those dogs, and you have a temptation to sell it. You get attached to them, but then too you got to eat, and sometimes you'll sell them, you know, and you don't want to, but like nowadays they're $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, you know. So you get one and you get a little bit broke, you might part with one, you know. Just pat him and say, well, it's been nice, you know. But anyway, I promised him I wouldn't sell this dog, and they weren't that high at that time. But anyway, I told him no, I wouldn't sell him, and I really liked the dog a lot, and I got more attached, and he became by far my best dog. And I don't know. I still trained him with that other dog, and the other dog was still okay. He was decent, but I just hadn't sorted it out until Brother Branham pointed it out. But I want to tell you something, and I'm not one, I think the term Brother Branham uses is I'm not given to illusions, but I want to tell you what happened to this dog. Well, I don't know what happened to the dog, but I'll tell you the story. He was getting old, and I would go see him every day. And I was living out of Show Low, about 40 miles at the time, and I was hunting Fort Apache. And the old dog was too old to go, and I just kept him around out of sentiment, and he was getting kind of arthritic, and he was filmy-eyed and stuff. But every day, I didn't even make him work. I mean, he just had a free ride, you know. And so every day I'd go to him first, see if he died, because it'd be cold, you know. And so we got a fresh blanket of snow over everything. About midnight, I knew it had snowed about midnight, because if it snows early, a lion hunter loves it. But if it snows at daylight, it messes you up, because lions won't be walking. So those early snows are what you like. And so I always get up several times and see if it's what time it quit and so on. And so it quit about midnight, and I went over. And Eli, there was he hadn't come out. He didn't come out of his box. There was no tracks. And the chain was going in and up, and I had a piece of carpeting over the door. And the chain went in there, and there was no tracks. So I'd fed and watered all my dogs and was going to go ahead and get ready to leave. And I yelled at Eli, and he didn't come out. And I went over there, and he was gone. And there was no tracks. And he just was gone. And I never knew really what happened, but he never died. And if he had left, I would have seen the tracks. And he didn't leave, and he wasn't there, and he never showed up for a couple of years. See, it's just funny. He just left, you know. He was just gone one day. So I didn't have to bury that dog, but I kept him till he was old. One day, the gentleman I mentioned, some of you may know him or may not, that I was dove hunting with, and that had told me he wasn't going to quit dove hunting. And he knew me pretty well, and he knew I wasn't a Christian. And one day he was sitting in the Ramada, down about the first third of the seats, and he called my name that day, and he called me Brother Dawson. And I'll be honest with you, it hurt my conscience when I heard him say that. I'll tell you that it kind of bothered me. So I purposed in my heart I was going to go to him and tell him not to call me that anymore. And so Bob, I didn't know that Bob had the same thought. And he told me later what he thought, because I didn't know this happened. I heard Brother Branham say it, and I didn't know what he meant. Bob said, Brother Dawson, he don't know him like I do. That's what he told me he thought. Brother Branham stopped, pointed his finger at him, and he said, I caught that. He came running up to me after church, and he said, forgive me. I said, for what? You don't owe me a He said, oh, man, I thought, yeah, I do. You forgive me. When he called you brother, I was critical in my heart. And he pointed at me real stern and told me, I caught that. And I said, well, you don't have to worry about me. I think you're right. I'm not a very good brother. So you didn't offend me. He said, well, I want you to forgive me. I said, fine. So when Brother Branham, I saw him, I don't remember how soon before I saw him again, a few days probably, or a month, 2 weeks, I don't know. Whenever he called me again, and we went, I said, you know, we were sitting down, and he said, what's bothering you? I said, well, I'll tell you what's bothering me over there. You called me brother. He said, well, Dawson, don't you tell me who to call brother. So I didn't. And then Bob, you know, I didn't tell you the rest. He came up to me and he said, well, I want you to forgive me, and I've been thinking, I don't think I better shoot any more of those doves. I said, that's probably a good deal. It was 2 years later. He said, I think I'm not going to shoot any more of those doves. So anyway, he quit. Yeah. Let me tell you about this truck. I had a brand new Chevy truck. I think it was a 65, and it was really a nice truck, you know, V8 and 4-speed and everything. And so Brother Branham told me he'd be looking for him a saguaro for the front of the den at the Circle Drive. I said, I find them all the time that we have to get rid of, and because they were starting to get a little sticky about just taking them anywhere. And I said, I'll find you one. And so they were building a school over at the little town of the Kennecott Copper owns it over there by Ray. I forgot the name. It starts with an S. Not Superior, but down by Ray. Anyway, the next little town. And then we were building a school in there, and I was doing some dozer work, and there was a beautiful saguaro. I said, oh, that's got to go to Brother Branham. So I got this dozer, and I dug up and got under it. And if you do it just right, you can lay them over real soft. If you take the root ball and take some more dirt, and I laid it over real tender. And the only thing, it was over some desert and real bad rocks. I mean, I says, oh, you guys, come on, let's get me a truck to it. And I said, no. I said, well, I'll do it. So I just hooked onto that trailer with my brand new truck. It was about a week old. And I took it up to that saguaro, and I took the dozer to the side and shoved this saguaro on this big trailer. Well, when I shoved my truck into a big old rock, and this brand new, it was on the right door. And I would never fix it because I liked it. Because I knew what I was doing when I did it. I kept that truck till it was old, and I never fixed the door. And my mother fussed at me all the time. When are you going to fix it? I said, I'm never going to fix it. But anyway, I could have bought him one from the nursery because it was so heavy, it broke all the tires on my trailer. I had to buy all new tires. And if I'd have fixed my truck and bought new tire, I could have just bought him one, you know. But anyway, it's up there in front of his house. I never fixed that car. You know, I want to read some of these things that about being with him. How are we on time? We all right?
Are we doing great?
So, anyway, you know, he asked me several times some real pointed personal questions. And I'll be quite frank, I would have rather not answered them. I really wouldn't. But one thing I did, look him in the eye and told him exactly the right answer, because I knew better than not to. And I didn't always know why he asked me. Sometimes I wondered if he just asked me if I was going to answer. It would be embarrassing. And I answered him straight. And I was always thankful of that, but, you know, I don't know exactly why he did. Because some of them would have been a lot easier not to answer, you know, or you know, that's just truth. I would have rather not. But I did every time, and I'm glad I did. But, you know, I don't know how to describe some of the things how he was, but I'll just put some notes here that he had a very good sense of humor. Now, he did. A lot of people might not think, but he did like to laugh, and he did laugh a lot. Once he got rested from the stress of the meetings. The first couple of days he wound up pretty good, and he didn't, of course, but as soon as he got relaxed, he did like to laugh. He had a very good sense of humor, and he had a lot of funny stories. And he'd laugh hard. He liked to belly laugh, you know. And, of course, he didn't have to worry about me helping him, you know. And so he was really a lot of fun. And several things that I noticed you know, he was always helpful. He was very helpful. I don't care what I was doing. I had never been around anybody, especially preachers, that help you. You know, they want to be waited on, you know, and they want somebody to coddle them. You know, I mean, he worked hard. I mean, he would do chores. He would do things that embarrassed me. He'd carry water for my dogs. I mean, he would drag up wood to the campfire. I mean, you know, very helpful. I mean, he just did part of the chores. When you were out there camping, he did half the work, at least, and he did it very not grudgingly, you know, freely, and he was very helpful. And that struck me. I mean, you know, I watched a lot of people. Of course, clients, they pay me to do it. I'm not don't get me wrong. You don't expect clients to do it. That's not what they're out there for. But I'm talking about when you take brothers, you know, and they're not even paying. You know, they're still letting you help them out, you know. And I was very striking to me about how helpful that Brother Branham was, and very thoughtful of those type of things. And he seemed to be always at the right place at the right time. And that was striking to me on many occasions, you know. And he wasn't too big to do something menial. I mean, that's what I loved it. He was, in my opinion, he was big enough to do something menial, you know. But he was very respectful of women, even unsaved women. He was careful. He doffed his hat. He took his hat off. He wouldn't have his hat on talking to a woman. He would take it off. And he tried to be respectful. And that was a lot of the older people remember when that was common. He would stand up when a woman came in the room. He didn't just sit and let them hunt a seat. He was very respectful. And you know, they didn't have to be sisters either. He was just that was one thing that I noticed. He was always kind and respectful to women. The reason you know the reason I said it. But a lot of people think in their message they got to be a little bit tough. You got to be a little tough with the woman, you know. Some people think that, and that, you know, there's nothing further from the truth, you know. But anyway, he didn't show us that example, you know. And he was always a gentleman. I don't care who he was, in what case. He was always, I considered him a consummate gentleman at all times. And here he was uneducated, but he had very educated actions. He had a lot of class because he was a gentleman. He was kind and considerate. And sometimes he could be stern, but the sternness was in very serious matters. He was unyielding. He was unyielding in serious matters. I mean, there was no, you know, he had courage to speak his mind. Of course, that's not a question. We know that. But he didn't, he wasn't pushy with it, but he could be stern, and he wasn't jovial. He knew when to laugh and he knew when to be stern, and he didn't mix them. That's what I guess I'm trying to say. There were times then he didn't do the hard laughing because he was in a serious subject. He was funny, and he imitated people pretty good. You know, some people he could imitate real good, and he voices and the way they talked. He could imitate Welsh Evans perfect, you know. I mean, he could talk real Southern if he wanted to, and it was pretty funny. But he did cut up quite a bit, and he didn't mind a practical joke pulled on him once in a while. You know, one time I remember this. In fact, some brothers were all camped at it was javelina season, and you know, it got out of hand pretty soon. There's 60, 80, 90 guys down there, and he just messed it up. But anyway, they found out where he was camping, so a bunch of people showed up. Well, I remember David Woods. Well, you know, I didn't get concerned about David Woods. For those who don't know that, you hear him talk about his best friend, Banks Wood. Well, David's his son that got healed of the polio, but David's a big lad, you know, now. But at that time, he was a youngster, and he really liked to pull jokes. Well, he did a bunch of things to Brother Branham, and the brothers got offended. And they didn't realize that's his next door neighbor. He grew up with him, and he could pull those tricks that they would or not do and get by with it, you know, like putting lizards in his bed and short sheeting his bed and all that stuff. He did that kind of stuff and just laughed, and they were offended by it. But see, he had enough humor that it didn't, he wasn't offended by it. And, you know, he said, David, I'll get you back. And David says, oh, man, I'm worried. You know, I don't know. Because he told me, he said, I'm going to get you back for those tricks. But he took it very good, you know. And I want to say this about him that I noticed in every occasion. He always left some sort of a testimony with a stranger. And he told me once, he said, now, that woman, the only thing I could tell her is that I was a minister, because she wouldn't let me tell her anything else. But yet, he told me this way. He said, as long as you don't feel the rejection, you can go. When they start pushing you back or rejecting it, then you leave it alone, and that's as far as you can go. He said, but as long as they're receiving it, you can go as long as they'll let you go. And that was real important to me, because sometimes we don't know what to do in witnessing to people. And you've seen people abuse that so badly. They just hammer them, and they want to save them, you know, and they want to show them. They want it for them so bad, and the people don't even want. And he told me once, he said, you can't help people if they don't know they need help. And so he said sometime, but I did notice that no matter how he left a stranger, there was some sort of witness there. If it was nothing but I am a minister, or sometimes the Lord allows me to see things, or sometimes people are healed in my meetings, we'd like to invite you out, that sort of thing. And then some of them that it just might be a little reprimand in their life. And I'd seen him do that, but he got by with it. He knew when to do it and when how. But that was striking to me, that he did try to witness in some form every time. And that was a common thing. I pretty much saw it. And I think I have an instant in here in my notes about that, because I was almost worried. I was worried about some real hard gentlemen that I knew. Okay, here it is. I'm going to read this. So I wrote it out. Once he testified to a game biologist, this was in Utah, and a game warden and a government hunter. And they had told Jerry they didn't like preachers, and they probably wasn't going to like this guy. And so he told me, he said, you go up front with the dogs. I've got something I want to tell these guys. I says, okay. So I moved up front, and he's talking to these guys, and I couldn't hear it because I did what he asked me to do. But I looked back, and they were all three crying. And he told me later that he led them to the Lord. I never saw two of them again. But the biologist, and they were doing a turkey transplant, and I never saw them again because they were guys from somewhere else. He said, I led them to the Lord. And I did see all of them crying, and they all were kneeling in the trail. I didn't get to hear any of it, but he didn't want me to embarrass them. And so I went right on like he told me to do. I did what he told me because he was a reason, or he would have let me be there. And so, you know, I was worried that they were going to be nasty to him, because they told Jerry they don't like preachers. You see what I mean? And they said they had already made up their mind. Jerry said, no, you've got to hear this guy. He's different than any you ever saw. So Jerry, who done told me not to bring a preacher around, is telling he's going out and getting converts, you know. The Jack Mormon, you know. Anyway. And then Jerry, you know, right after that, I didn't see the other guys, and Jerry, he told me, he said, you know, he said, Bill, that was his brother-in-law. The biologist was his brother-in-law, by the way. And he said, you know, he's always asking for Bill. He said, can you get me his address? He wants to talk to him again. I said, you bet, I will. So I got him the Jeffersonville address. But anyway, he told me numerous times that he had asked for him. And then Jerry told me several times after the accident that he missed Bill. Told me that several times. He said, I really miss your friend Bill. And so, you know, sometimes we don't know how deep it ran, you know. Sometimes it looks like it's frivolous. Sometimes you don't think it's sinking in. It may have a seed planted, you know. I want to leave. I'm going to just give you one more, and then I'm going to leave you with this one. And because this one was different than anything I had ever encountered with him, and was somewhat surprising. Jerry and I, this government hunter, he and I had a little training device that we used to train lion hound pups. We had captured a live lion, and we kept it in a milk barn way out in the country because it's illegal to have them. And it's illegal to do what we were doing, but we could really train lion dogs. We would take this lion and had a rebar front on it, and I could pull the rope and let our pups watch this lion run off. Then we'd dump our pups out, and they'd chase this lion till he treed. And then we would tie our pups up, and I'd get up there and jerk this lion out and go to another tree and turn him loose and let him trail him again. Then we'd go tie him up again, take him back home. Well, we'd been doing that, and we didn't tell anybody. It was just our solemn secret, because we didn't want the other lion hunters knowing we had it, because they'd be wanting to, and then pretty soon they'd tell somebody else, their brother-in-law, and then pretty soon you're in trouble. So we had a pact. Nobody knows, okay? Nobody knows our secret. So I'm riding along in the pickup with Brother Branham, and he gets this real funny look on his face, and he says, you know, I'm going to tell you about a friend of mine, how he trains lion dogs. And he describes our setup to a T, and he says, it's got this little rebar on it, and they pull the rope. He said, it works real good, you might want to try it.
Thank you, Brother Dawson. That's the life of Christ that you witnessed with a mighty man of God in our day. And that's the life I want to emanate. And we can all start by respecting one another more, especially the household of faith and everyone. And so everything Brother Dawson said is true. So many times he'd take his hat off, especially if a woman was with you. Many times he's even pulled his hat off when he talked to me, and he'd take his hat off. And you know, I didn't know what he was doing then, but have you ever been riding along and you feel the presence of the Lord? What's the first thing you do? Many times now I pull my hat off when I feel that presence of the Lord, lay it on the dash and different things like that. And I finally, as I got older, I figured what Brother Branham was doing. That presence of the Lord was coming, and he was respecting it by taking his hat off. And like when we walk through the sanctuary, what do? We pull our hats off to respect the Lord and different things like that. So we can never go wrong respecting and loving one another. And that quote that I read to the church, how God is so patient with us not to call our failures out, and deals so patiently with us. And he says he knows how to encourage us in the right things and discourage us in the wrong things. And he said, this is the way to handle the church and the way to handle our families. And what wisdom of God has been left us in the message of the hour. And what Brother Dawson said about humor, Brother Branham loved humor, because when we hunted with him, he had us laughing and rolling, and he could imitate anybody if he wanted to talk like that. And then when he got all done, and he said, brother, he says, God loves humor, but said he hates smut. And so he was a real man's man, a real godly man. And I thank God for these living testimonies that we have. And I see that in his people today. I see that same characteristic of Christ in the bride today. And so I'm happy Brother Dawson came to be with us. I believe his steps were instructed of the Lord. And it's so encouraging to have someone come and back up everything that you've ever experienced and from another angle, another direction, but it was all the same God. And I can truly say, all the times that I was with Brother Branham, the thoughts never entered my mind that he was God. The thoughts crossed me. I am so close to God. I feel so close to God. I'm in a presence that I've never been in before. And when I left him, you felt so much closer to Jesus Christ. You didn't feel like you was Brother Branham's bosom buddy, but you felt close to Jesus Christ. And that's what we need more in our lives, each one of us. Every time we leave somebody, leave them feeling like they're closer to Christ than they've ever been. And so we thank God for this example that we've had in this day and age. And that same spirit, the bride, we'll see, the prophet, the bride, and the Spirit will all be saying the same thing, having the same nature and everything. So I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it immensely. It's just been, it's like salve rubbed over your life. And so I'd like Donald to come lead us in a song. And remember Brother Dawson, his family, and what he does. And now you've got a real friend that you can pray for, and he can pray for all of us, okay? So Donald, if you'll just come lead us in some songs, and then we'll close. God bless you. Thank you for being so lovely and patient. But how could you not enjoy it? Amen.
Oh, my brother, do you know the Savior, who is wondrous, kind, and true? He's the rock of your salvation. There's honey in the rock for you. Oh, there's honey in the rock, my brother. There is honey in the rock for you. Leave your sins for the blood to cover. There is honey in the rock for you. Have you tasted that the Lord is gracious? Do you walk in the way that's true? Have you drank from the living fountain? There is honey in the rock for you. Oh, there's honey in the rock, my brother. Yes, there's honey in the rock for you. What is this? Leave your sins